Okay, everyone. So, welcome again. Just finished the coffee offering, first of all. That's good. And so we're coming to the basically the last session of this retreat. And we're going to finish off, we're going to look at the last simile in the Pinapindupama Sutta. And then we're going to have a look at the Girimananda Sutta, which is a nice little sutta, quite unusual. So we have a look at this, and it's all about developing perceptions, about seeing things in an appropriate way. And of course, in Buddhism, appropriate means anything which makes the path happen. If the path happens, that is always the appropriate perception. That is the idea of yoniso manasikara. It is defined in terms of what works, what makes the mind peaceful, what makes you see things in the right way. So all of this is really part of the broader idea of yoniso manasikara. So let us carry on. Okay, so here we are. So suppose a magician or the apprentice was to perform a magic trick at a crossroads, and a person with clear eyes would see it, contemplate it, examining it carefully, and it would appear to them as completely void, hollow, and insubstantial. For what substance could there be in a magic trick? In the same way, a mendicant sees and contemplates any kind of consciousness at all, sabbang vinyanang, past, future, or present, internal or external, coarse or fine, inferior or superior, far or near, examining it carefully, and it appears to them as completely void, hollow, and insubstantial. For what substance could there be in consciousness? It's a pretty high question. For what substance could there be in consciousness? It sounds a bit like it is obvious, but of course it is not obvious at all. This is one of the most profound things on the Buddhist path. So it's just the way the Buddha phrases things. And it's interesting here to think of consciousness like a magic trick. It is something that you don't really understand. It's something that seems kind of what is consciousness anyway? It is this ability to be aware. What is this awareness? It reminds me of some of the modern discussions in the world about consciousness. Sometimes it is called the hard problem of consciousness, because philosophers don't really understand what it is. They can't really figure it out. They can't really understand its relationship to the material world, whether consciousness appears out of material phenomena, or whether consciousness comes first and material phenomena appear as a consequence of consciousness. All of these are philosophical questions. It's as if the world has always struggled with these questions, not really understood it. And then the Buddha calls it like a magic trick. So you can it sort of fits well with the overall idea of consciousness being something very strange. And it kind of appears with other phenomena. It cannot exist on its own. It only exists together with nama-rupa. Nama-rupa paccaya vijnana, vijnana paccaya nama-rupa. This mutual conditionality that's called the whirlpool, kind of two things dancing around each other, existing only together. The two sheaths of reed leaning against each other. Take one away, the other disappears. So consciousness is like a magic trick. This existence is like magic. And just as magic is hollow, so consciousness itself is also hollow. There is nothing really there, nothing of substance. It comes and goes. And I think this is one of those extraordinary insights that you can have when you start to see that consciousness is not continuous. It has gaps. It moves from one consciousness to another one. There are 6 classes of consciousness, the cha, vijnana, kaya. And each class is really incompatible with the other classes. There is no movement from one class to the next one. As one class stops, the other one begins. And there is no connection between them. And so consciousness itself is this non-continuous phenomenon. And it's kind of, this you can imagine the kind of insight it is to see that, because it feels like consciousness is always there, always in the background, always the real me is the person who is aware, who takes in all the information. And seeing that is not the case is kind of radical, extraordinary. And that is the most profound insight on the Buddhist path, the insight that goes against all other teachings in the world, all other spiritual teachings, all other religions. Almost all religions are known for some kind of substance, some kind of reality. They call it Atman, they call it Brahman, they call it God, they call it the soul, they call it the ground of consciousness, they call it the universal spirit, they call it all of these things. And it turns out when the Buddha turns the kind of the wisdom of himself onto these things, they turn out to be empty, insubstantial. And that is the real discovery of the Buddha. When you go to the Chula Sihanada Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya number 11, this is what the Buddha says basically there, that the one thing that distinguishes the Buddhist teaching, the Dhamma, from everything else is the idea of non-self. In other words, the insubstantiality of consciousness itself. This is the one thing that makes Buddhism stand out among the philosophies and religions of the world. The one thing that makes it unique, and the one thing that means that Buddhism enables you to let go of everything, whereas all of these other teachings, in the end, you are clinging to something. You're clinging to this idea of a self, clinging to the idea of consciousness, the idea of mind. And what is kind of frightening is that when you look at Buddhism in the present day, you start to see this happening more and more also within Buddhism. More and more holding on to this idea of a mind, the chitta, the amata chitta, the undying mind. It is almost impossible to distinguish it from Advaita Vedanta and the Hindu traditions. And it's becoming quite common in the Buddhist world. And I think it is something that anyone who is interested in the suttas, it is something that needs to be challenged, because eventually Buddhism is no different from any other religion. It believes in some kind of highest reality, some kind of ground of existence. Call it chitta, call it whatever you like, doesn't matter. It is similar to other religions because of that. And I think this is very kind of worrying, but there's a very powerful tendency in the human mind to want to exist. This is where the Sasatavada, the eternalist doctrine, the eternalist views come from. We want to exist. And because we want to exist, we distort the Buddhist teachings and we find a self, we find an existing consciousness within Buddhism when actually there is no such thing. So you will see here the way it is phrased, all consciousness, sabbang vijnanang. There is no room there for any kind of consciousness or mind or anything which is outside of this consciousness. Everything is included. And because everything is included, it means that the whole idea of some sort of eternal mind or whatever is a misconstruction according to the Buddha. So, these are the 5 similes, very interesting and nice to contemplate and to get an insight into the empty nature of existence. This is why we say that existence is empty, it's sunyata, it's empty of a self, empty of an inherent existence or entity. That's why it is empty. Seeing this, a learned noble disciple grows disillusioned, or he rejects form, he rejects feeling, she reflects perception, choices and consciousness. Rejecting these things, desire fades away, virajeti. When desire fades away, they are freed, vimutti. When they are freed, they know that they are freed. They understand there is no return to any state of existence. So then you become an arahant based on these profound contemplations of the 5 khandhas. This last part here is kind of what happens when you see things. I don't know if you, just very briefly to explain to you what is going on. when you see the emptiness of the five khandhas, you are also seeing the dukkha. You're also seeing the impermanence. And because you're seeing the dukkha, you reject the five khandhas. You turn away from them. Turning away, your desire for these things eventually disappear. How can you desire dukkha? You can't desire dukkha. And then when tanha is completely gone, tanha has been undercut, then the mind is liberated, it is freed. That is the meaning of liberation, the ending of tanha. And when you are freed, you know that you are freed. So if you have any doubts, if you think maybe I'm an arahant, maybe not, then you are not an arahant. If you're an arahant, you know that you're an arahant. So if you have any doubts, you're not an arahant. Sorry, just telling you the truth. Okay. Now we come to the Giri Mananda Sutta, found in the Anguttara Nikaya Tens, the Dasaka Nipata, Sutta number 60. And this is a slightly peculiar sutta, and as you will see shortly, I will explain a few things about its peculiarities. But nevertheless, it is interesting because it talks about 10 different kinds of perception that we can develop on the Buddhist path. And of course, all of these perceptions are useful for leaning the mind towards Nibbana, leaning it towards the spiritual practice. So here goes. This is how it goes. At one time, the Buddha was staying near Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anapanasati's monastery. Now, at that time, the Venerable Girimananda was sick, suffering gravely ill. Then Venerable Ananda went up to the Buddha, bowed, sat down to one side, and said to him, "Sir, Venerable Girimananda is sick, suffering gravely ill. Sir, please go to Venerable Girimananda out of compassion." And the Buddha replies, "Ananda, if you were to recite to the mendicant, the bhikkhu Girimananda, these 10 perceptions, it is possible that after hearing them, his illness will die down on the spot." So this is what they call a paritta. Yeah, paritta is the kind of chants we do, or the recitations we do in Buddhism, to auspicious chants, or chants to kind of get you out of sickness and these kind of things. This is kind of becomes a paritta, the Girimananda paritta, and there are quite a few things in the suttas. You have the Bojjhanga paritta, where you recite the 7 Bojjhangas, and there are 3 suttas in the Bojjhanga Samyutta that talk about monks reciting the Bojjhangas, and the person who is sick coming out of those sicknesses. One of those people coming out of sickness is the Buddha himself. That's kind of extraordinary, isn't it? One monk chants, I think one of the monks chants the 7 Bojjhangas, and it kind of helps the Buddha out of a sickness. It's kind of a strange, one of those slightly strange things in the Pali Canon. You wonder what is going on. I'm not going to discuss that in detail now, but it shows the basic idea of reciting the Dhamma for someone who is sick. And then presumably what happens is that they get inspired, the mind gets clear, the mind maybe experiences joy and these kind of things. And that clarity of mind, the joy of the mind, the sense of meaning and purpose, that then leads to the power of the mind somehow healing the body. Something like that seems to be going on. And this is obviously the case here as well. So this monk Girimananda is never heard of anywhere else. He only occurs in this particular sutta. And I don't think there are any parallel suttas anywhere else. It only exists in the Pali. And some of the things in the sutta are a little bit unusual. For example, we will see in a second that Anapanasati, the mindfulness of breathing, is called the sanya of Anapanasati, which is not really done anywhere else, only in this particular sutta. There is some definitions of some of the sanyas, like the anicca sanya is defined in a very strange and unusual way. So this sutta is kind of unique in many ways. But does that mean that the sutta is dodgy? Because it is so unique? I don't know, maybe it's still true. It could still be possible. It's also possible that it may be slightly late because it sticks out a little bit. It's a little bit different from other suttas. So it could be that it is slightly late. We just don't know. But it's always good to realize when a sutta stands out, because that means that if it contradicts other parts of the suttas, then you don't have to take it too seriously. It should fall in line somehow with the rest of the suttas. Anyway, Girimananda Sutta. What are these 10 perceptions? What 10? And this is the Buddha speaking. He says the perceptions of impermanence, the perception of not self, the perception of ugliness, the perception of drawbacks, the perception of giving up, the perception of fading away, the perception of cessation, the perception of dissatisfaction with the whole world, the perception of impermanence of all conditions, and mindfulness of breathing here. So these are the 10 perceptions. And so these are all things that we can contemplate, to kind of help us on the path. So this is going to be an exciting sutta. Let's start with the first one. What is the perception of impermanence? It's when the mendicant has gone to the wilderness, to the root of a tree, or the foot of a tree, to an empty hut, and reflects like this. Form, feeling, perception, choices, and consciousness are impermanent. And so they meditate observing impermanence in the 5 grasping aggregates. This is called the perception of impermanence. So an important point that kind of gives us a little bit of framework here for this particular, what is going on here, is the first line. When a mendicant has gone to the wilderness, the root of a tree, and an empty hut. This is very significant to understand what is going on here. Because what this means, this is the kind of thing that you always see when someone is getting seriously into meditation. This is what you see before the Anapanasati. This is what you see before they abandon the hindrance and enter the jhanas. So this signifies real deep meditation. This is really what this is about. And so when we consider the 5 aggregates as impermanent in this way, it happens always in the context of deep meditation, ideally samadhi. That is the ideal way of doing this kind of contemplation. And then you can start to understand what this means. It means what we have been talking about all along in the Anapanasati Sutta. You go through the Anapanasati and then you contemplate afterwards. You see how the aggregates change, how they disappear over time, and how eventually they cease at the very end. You contemplate it in this way as part of your meditation practice, part of the samatha practice, and then you see these things very deeply. That is the impermanence in the 5 aggregates and contemplation of impermanence. Of course, the contemplation of impermanence can be much broader than that, but here it is defined as this kind of, I think this is one of the clues that kind of gives away what this sutta is about. It is about deep meditation all the way through, and that is why it has the power to take Girimananda out of sickness. So these are profound ways of contemplating anicca. It is not any kind of anicca contemplation, but a profound anicca contemplation here. Let's go on to the next one. We have already talked quite a bit about this before, so we go on to the next one here. What is the perception of not self? It is when the mendicant has gone to a wilderness, or to the foot of a tree or an empty hut, and it reflects like this. The eye and sights, the ear and sounds, the nose and smells, tongue and tastes, body and touches, the mind and mental content are not self. And so they meditate observing not self in the interior and exterior sense fields. This is called perception of not self. So the interior sense field is basically your ability to sense. It is seeing itself, hearing itself. And so you understand the impermanence in the very fact that you can see, the very fact that you can hear. And the exterior sense fields are all the objects in the world that we know through the interior sense fields. These are called ayatana. Ayatana is like a stretching out, a field, or a sphere, or something like that. And so again, this is a profound kind of contemplation. Again, you are gone to the wilderness, to the foot of a tree or an empty hut. So again, this is done in the contexts of Anapanasati and Samadhi. These things are not are profound things. And so if you want to really understand the eye and sights as non-self, the deeper your meditation is, the more ability you have to see this. The easier it becomes. And it becomes especially easy to see the non-self in these things when they disappear completely. One of the very important ideas of non-self is whenever anything that is a self is something that you can control, something you can say, be like this, be like that. And in our ordinary life, we have a sense that we are in charge of our eyes. I look at the coffee right now. I shouldn't look at the coffee, it gives rise to craving. Don't look at the coffee. No, I'm just joking. It's okay, I can deal with it. We have a sense that we can look at what we want. We have a sense that we have the ability to choose. And so it doesn't really feel like the senses are non-self from that perspective. But the moment you completely leave the senses behind, the moment you enter a deep state of samadhi, you can no longer access the senses. You can no longer decide to see. And this is one of the reasons why it is so difficult to enter samadhi, because you actually have to give up the six senses. It is as if you may never see again. That is why it is difficult. But then when you come out afterwards, you realize actually these senses must be non-self, because I couldn't access them, and I was still there. I was still here in the samadhi. Extraneous, they are outside, they are additional to what is the real me. The real me is surely the samadhi. Of course, that's also wrong, but at least it's one step in the right direction. And you start to see that the senses are not really yours. And of course, that opens up a new way of looking at it. That means that when you interact with the world, you understand for the first time how conditioned everything is. How when you see things, when you have certain objects in the mind, when you hear things, etc., you start to understand that these things are largely conditioned. They arise because of all kind of things. When the truck goes by on the road, you don't have a choice to hear it. You have to hear it because it's so loud. It kind of crashes into your ear. It is the external environment taking over your mind. And very often it's the other way around. It is we go out into the world to experience certain things. What do you want to experience? You follow the inclinations of the mind that have been laid down over a long, long period of time. And now the mind plays out those inclinations of the mind. And you look wherever the mind inclines. And you start to understand this idea of conditionality, that the senses are the instruments of the conditionality of the mind. The senses play out, that inner program gets played out through the senses, and that is why the senses experience what they experience. This is the idea of non-self, of not really being in charge, but being subject to the senses rather than being in charge of the senses. So very interesting. This is similar to the thing I was talking about yesterday, about that, when I talked about this Ajahn Brahm listening to his Dhamma talk from before and seeing it was the same. It's this non-self idea in the will, the volition. Here the senses, but similar kind of thing, because volition is always involved with the senses in this way. So in this way you understand the idea of non-self. The idea of non-self is the idea, to a very large part, that we are more like robots than autonomous beings. We are driven, our desires, our volition, our will comes about because of cause and conditions, not because that there is some autonomous agent inside that decides to do things one way or another. That is the real idea, a very important part of the non-self idea. And it also comes into the picture right here with the six senses. If you want to read more about non-self, there are some very beautiful suttas about non-self that I would recommend anyone who hasn't studied this topic in detail. One of them is the Alagad Upama Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 22. It's a very profound sutta, but very beautiful in so many ways. And then there is the Anatalakkhana Sutta, the characteristics of non-self, which is found in the Kanda Sangyutta. I think it's number 57, 59? 57, one of those in the Kanda Sangyutta, also found in the Vinaya Pitaka. These are two of the kind of really critical suttas that discuss the idea of non-self, and very powerful, beautiful suttas. Anyway, let's leave it at that, because we have still quite a bit to go through, so I don't have time to spend too much time on this, but again, this is the development of that perception here. The next one is the development, what is the perception of ugliness? Or you can say the perception of lack of beauty, if you wish. It is when the mendicant examines their body, their own body, up from the soles of the feet and down from the tips of the hairs, wrapped in skin and full of many kinds of filth. Okay, filth or impurities or whatever you want to call it. In this body there is head hair, body hair, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, sinews, bones, bone marrow, kidneys, heart, liver, diaphragm, spleen, lungs, intestines, mesentery, undigested food, feces, bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease, saliva, snot, synovial fluid, and urine. And so they meditate observing the ugliness in this body. This is called the perception of ugliness. And this is quite a simple meditation to do. And if you find that this makes you peaceful, it can be very useful. You will notice that this meditation should always be done on one's own body. It's imang eva kaya. Imang means this very body, one's own body. And the whole body wrapped in skin. The skin is like the outer limit. Everything within the skin is what you contemplate. And so again, if you think about these things and you think about the body without the skin, then the body loses so much of its beauty. And of course, this is the reality. This is what the body actually is like. This is not just kind of pretending, but this is what it is like. So it is a realistic understanding of what the body is like. And it cools down the passions. It cools down the attachment to the body. And the mind can become quite cool when you use these kind of contemplations. It's actually quite a powerful contemplation. It works very quickly, and that's why it is so powerful. But it also disappears quite quickly as well, so you have to kind of keep on doing it sometimes. And by the way, while I'm at it, the ant has come to drink coffee. This is not for you, ant. This is... well, it's running really fast now. Probably had some coffee. Okay, so one small point I'd just like to make at this time is also that you will notice when you count the body parts, there are 31 parts of the body, not 32. And it's always interesting. Usually when I ask any kind of assembly anywhere in the world, actually these days the assemblies are kind of catching on. But in the beginning, when I asked how many parts of the body are there, people always say 32 parts of the body. And of course, the reason is because everyone has heard of the body parts from the Visuddhimagga, not from the suttas. So in the Visuddhimagga, there's 32. In the suttas, there's 31. And that is not because the number of parts matter. It's kind of irrelevant whether it's 31 or 32 or 100 parts or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But it's interesting to see where we get our information from. And you will start to understand, when you see these little things again and again and again, you understand that most Buddhists, they have their information not from the suttas, but from the commentaries. And this is always something we should be on the lookout for. So just making that point, just to so people can be aware of that. Next, perception. What is... I should maybe say that this perception of ugliness is really a perception of imagination. Yeah, you have seen the charts of the body, you know roughly what the body is like, and so you can use imagination to do this. This is how this works. What is the perception of drawbacks, the adinava sanya? It's when a mendicant has gone to the wilderness, to the root of a tree, or to an empty hut, and reflects like this. This body has much suffering and many drawbacks. For this body is beset by many kinds of affliction, such as the following: disease of the eye, disease of the inner ear, of the nose, of the tongue, of the body, of the head, of the outer ear, of the mouth, of the teeth, of the lips, cough, asthma, catarrh, inflammation, fever, stomachache, fainting, dysentery, gastric pain, cholera, leprosy, boils, eczema, tuberculosis, epilepsy, herpes, itch, scabs, smallpox, scabies, hemorrhage, diabetes, piles, pimples, and ulcers. Affliction stemming from disorder of the bile, phlegm, wind, and their conjunction. Affliction caused by change in the weather, by not taking care of yourself, by overexertion, or as the result of past deeds. Cold, heat, hunger, thirst, defecation, and urination. And so they meditate observing the drawbacks in this body. This is called the perception of drawbacks. Here is just really a long list of all the kind of problems that the body has. Endless problems in this body. Everyone goes to the doctor every now and again. Everyone has some kind of issues in this body. And of course, we could make that list much, much longer in the present day. These are the diseases of the ancient world 2,500 years ago. And of course, now it is far, far more than that. But the body is just inherently problematic, and this is what this is about. So it is again, it's about giving up attachments to the body. It is interesting here that again it starts with the idea of gone to a secluded spot, the wilderness or whatever. So in this case, you use this when you have a degree of samadhi to be able to let go of the body completely. This is like when you find that your samadhi or your mindfulness of breathing, it comes to a plateau and it doesn't go any further, and you realize you have to let go a little bit more, and then that letting go can then happen through this kind of contemplation. The body is just inherently problematic, inherently out of control. You don't know what's going to happen next. I often like to think of what illnesses are in here waiting to come out. Where is the cancer? My father died of cancer. My sister died of cancer. Probably it's in my genes. Probably I'm genetically predisposed to die of cancer. So where is it? I just can't feel it yet. It's probably there waiting to come out. And that is not really unrealistic at all. If you look at the percentage of people in the world who die of cancer, and if you look at the genetic component, quite likely, fairly high percentage that you actually might die of these things. So just get used to it. Get used to having cancer. Get used to having all of these lesser kind of illnesses. This is the nature of the body. And then it has a nice little thing at the end there. I find it very funny that pimples is added to the list. I find that really kind of amusing. It doesn't really fit with the illnesses, but anyway, whatever. And then it has the idea towards the end of the affliction caused by the disorders of bile, phlegm, and wind. And I should say that pimples is Bhante Sudato's interpretation. I think the Pali actually is it's a bit more serious than that, I think. But anyway, then you have these other afflictions by bile, phlegm, and wind. So these are ancient Indian Ayurvedic medical diagnoses. And then you have the affliction caused by the changes in the weather, Ujju Parinama. Anyway, so the changing in the weather, and then you have the not taking care of yourself, overexertion. Some of these translations are a bit uncertain. Some people say it means assault, not overexertion. Some people say it being careless, not taking care of yourself, but you get an idea. We are careless, we walk into the street at the wrong time, you walk down the steps a bit too fast, you stumble somewhere, you fall over, these kind of things. or, and then comes the interesting thing, or the result of past deeds. And this is kind of a very important statement right here, and you see this in a number of places in the suttas for understanding kamma vipaka in the right way. It is very common in the Buddhist world, and please don't make that same mistake, to think that everything is caused by kamma. And whenever people have a problem, they ask, oh, what kind of kamma did I do in the past to deserve this? I say, don't know. I have no idea what kind of kamma you did in the past. Maybe you didn't do any bad kamma. The mistake you did was not kamma. The mistake you did was being born as a human being. That's where you made a mistake. It's not your parents' fault that you become a human being. It is your fault that you become a human being. And the point is, and you can see that here, if you become a human being, you can expect these things to happen. You can expect illnesses, and that illness is not really or not necessarily caused by karma from the past. It is the nature of the body to have illnesses. If you are a human being, you can expect assault. If you are a human being, you can expect sometimes you will be careless. If you are a human being, you can expect the weather. Uttu parinama, that's what I wanted to say before. Uttu parinama, expect the weather to be difficult sometimes, or the climate to be difficult. Climate change is itself a natural phenomenon in the world. So a lot of the suffering we have in human life is because we are human beings, and not because of karma in the past. And this is a very kind of important point, because what that means is that there is no solution. The solution is not just to do lots of good karma, and then in your next life you will have the perfect life as a human being. Life as a human being is never perfect. It always has these defects, regardless of how much good karma you make. Okay, if you get reborn as a deva, it is a little bit better, but lo and behold, you read the suttas and you read the life of the devas, and their life too have similar problems as you have in the human realm. They have heartache, they get attached to things, they have dukkha in various ways in the heaven realm. They go to war, for goodness sake, in the heavens. And so it is not that different from the human realm. And so this is an important way of understanding the idea of karma. It does not behind everything. And so when we see kind of big disasters in the world, the great tsunamis, we see how whole villages get wiped out, for example. It doesn't mean that everyone in that village had bad karma. There's many reasons why people die. They die for these reasons, and sometimes because of karma. So getting these things right is important. If you read the Chula Kamma Vibhanga Sutta, you have to be careful how you read that sutta. That sutta does not mean that if you get sick, it is because of you were violent in the past, or if you die young, it is because you killed people in the past. That is not what it means. What it means is that if you kill people, then you will have a short life. It doesn't mean that everyone who has a short life killed people in the past. Those two statements are very different. Anyway, this is a bit on the side of what we're talking about, but this is the perception of drawbacks. And so again, it helps you to let go of the body. What is the perception of giving up? This is the pahana sanya. It's when a mendicant does not tolerate a sensual, malicious, or ill will, if you like, or harmful thought that has arisen, and they don't tolerate any bad, unskillful qualities that have arisen, but give them up, get rid of them, eliminate them, and obliterate them. This is called the perception of giving up. So here, this is a very important part of the training of the mind. The abandoning of the bad thoughts. And I've already talked about this a little bit before, about how to overcome ill will and these kind of things. And here, you don't tolerate these negative qualities of the mind. And it's very interesting to consider what it means not to tolerate things. When you read this particular description, it says you give them up, you get rid of them, you eliminate them, you obliterate them. When you read that, you would be, I would forgive you for thinking that it means that you really use a lot of willpower. You take the sledgehammer and you crush those defilements once and for all with a big sledgehammer of the will. But actually that would be wrong if you thought that. This is not what it means. And this is what is so interesting about the suttas. These very powerful verb, anabhavang karoti, making them not exist, obliterating them, eliminating them. How it is actually done is not through willpower, but through wisdom, through yoniso manasikara. That is how you overcome these things. And this is one of the suttas that I very often read out on these retreats. This is the Dveda Vitaka Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 19. It talks precisely about this, and it is the Buddha talking about himself, how he overcame these thoughts before his awakening, and he also eliminates them, obliterates them. But how does he do that? It does, and the whole sutta is about how you should think, how you should reflect to overcome these kind of qualities. And how should you reflect? You should reflect like this. You should reflect, this thought is for my own suffering. The moment you understand it is to your own suffering, you abandon that thought. If you know that ill will really is causing you suffering, you abandon it. This thought of ill will is for the suffering of others, so you abandon it based on that thought alone. This thought of ill will is for the suffering of both myself and others, and so based on that, you abandon that ill will. This thought of ill will destroys panya nirodhika. It makes wisdom end. It is agata patibaddha or something like that. It is bound up with agata. Agata means like something unpleasant. It's painful. It is unpleasant in a certain way. It is tied up with displeasure. And finally, it is nibbana asangvatanika. It leads away from nibbana, the cooling. And based on those thoughts, again, you give it up. This is how the Buddha, to be, abandons these thoughts. And you will notice how simple it is. All you have to do is really understand how ill will is bad for yourself and bad for others, how it destroys wisdom. These are reflections in the mind. And if you really understand that, you give it up like that. It's like picking up a hot piece of coal. Maybe you think it's cold, but you pick it up. How long are you going to hold on to that hot piece of coal? Not very long, right? This moment you realize it's hot, you let go straight away. And this is kind of the idea here. These things are hot. You touch them, you burn yourself. Why do we keep on touching them? Because we don't understand the burning consequence of these things. That is the problem. And so what we have to do, a part of this, is actually to reflect how dangerous ill will is. How dangerous it is to be harming of other beings. How dangerous it is to be attached to the five sense world. That is the problem. And once we contemplate this more and more and more, and we really understand the problem in these things, we let go in the same way as you let go of a hot piece of coal, because it's going to burn you. And so this is how these reflections work. This is the pahana sanya, the perception of abandoning. You abandon these things that are basically incredibly detrimental, but we do not understand how detrimental and dangerous they are. That is the problem. It's the lack of right view again, which is the problem. And so you cultivate that view, that understanding of how dangerous this is. It leads ultimately to a bad rebirth, to continued existence, to all kind of dukkha for yourself and others, and it destroys your wisdom. The moment you are in the grip of anger, your wisdom is completely gone. Your mind is biased and distorted. It's impossible for you to make good decisions at that point. Never make a decision of anything if your mind is full of defilements. It's the wrong time to make decisions. So this is in brief the idea of abandoning. And I usually do this in conjunction with the Dveda Vitaka Sutta, so check it out for yourself. I have done this here in Sri Lanka before. I've been to Sri Lanka quite a few times, and I think there are recordings of these things on, and we're not sure, are they available? They're probably available somewhere on the internet, I guess. So you have to ask the organizers of the retreat for that information if you are interested in reading those, listening to those talks, because they expand on this quite a bit. And you can also see the talks on the Agata Pativinaya Sutta that was before on how to overcome ill will in a lot of detail, and also the Potalya Sutta. All of these things kind of go together. So that is the Pahana Sanya. And I think that Pahana here can also be understood maybe in a broader way. Most of the time in the suttas, it does not describe what the Pahana Sanya is. It just says, develop the Pahana Sanya. But basically, it is the perception of giving up. So you develop the idea in your mind of giving up, the beauty of giving up, the power of letting things go, of not having things, of non-ownership, of not having to deal with stuff, of having a simple life. The Pahana Sanya, giving up even the mental content, as we see here, the giving up of all of these negative things. So I think it is also a general contemplation of giving up, eliminating things. And you can take it in that direction as well. In the suttas, the Pahana Sanya always goes together with the Viraga Sanya and the Nirodha Sanya. They go together. So they are kind of they are like a triad, and they must have some sort of similar meaning and belong together in this way. Okay. So that is the perception of giving up. What is the perception of fading away? Ooh, wow. My coffee is getting very popular with the ants. They're coming. Oh well, okay, let them have some coffee. So, so the perception of fading away. What is this? It's when a mendicant again has gone to the wilderness, to the root of a tree, or to an empty hut, and reflects like this. This is peaceful. This is sublime. That is the stilling of all activities, the letting go of all attachments, the ending of craving, fading away, extinguishment. This is called the perception of fading away. So again, this is very profound. So in here again, you go to the wilderness, you go to a secluded place first of all. This is what happens when your meditation becomes really deep. This is what you do usually after samadhi, when you have some understanding of what is going on. And then you reflect, you develop this perception. And you can develop this perception even without samadhi, but obviously far more powerful when you have samadhi. This is peaceful, this is sublime. In other words, this is really worthwhile. This is what the meaning of life is all about. Do you want the sublime, or do you want the low and dodgy? Do you want the peaceful, or do you want the agitated things in the world? Peace is beautiful. The sublime, obviously, is beautiful. The sublime here is panita. The opposite of panita is hina. Hina is hinayana. It's the low, the inferior. This is the superior, the sublime. Everyone wants the superior. And if you think you don't want the superior, it means you haven't contemplated enough. And what is this peaceful? What is this sublime? What is this thing that is really worthwhile in life? This is what is really worthwhile. The stilling of all activities. Sabbe sankhara samatha. Samatha is the same thing as samatha meditation, right? All sankhara stilled. What does that mean? It means all the will in the mind, all the doing in the mind has come to zero. You have entered a full state of samadhi, or even more, you are an arahant, and you don't create anything anymore. This is peaceful, this is sublime. The will is a torturer. This is the best. The letting go of all attachments. Sab uppadi patinisaga. Sab uppadi patinisaga. Letting go of all attachments. Everything in the world that you think you own. Everything in the world you think you are. Everything in the world you take as yourself. These are all the attachments. It is a lot. It is everything. Letting go of those things. That is peaceful. That is sublime. Goes against the stream. It goes against how the world thinks. It's the exact opposite. The ending of craving. The ending of craving is very closely related to the stilling of all activities. Because when there is craving, no craving, there is nothing to be done anymore. So craving comes to an end. Craving So then you don't do anything because there is no craving. Craving is a problem. It is not something to be celebrated. Fading away, things fading away, and finally extinguishment, nibbana itself. Nibbana is the extinguishment of the of the defilements of the mind, lobha dosa moha. It is the ending of craving, it is the extinguishment of dukkha, and finally it is the extinguishment of the 5 khandhas when the arahant passes away. So this is the perception of fading away. Try to understand what is really beautiful in the world, what is really powerful. The peace of the mind, the holding on to nothing. This is what really is important. This is what nibbana is all about. And what is the perception of cessation? It is when a mendicant has gone to the wilderness or the root of a tree or an empty hut and reflects like this. This is peaceful, this is sublime. That is the stilling of all activities, the letting go of all attachments, the ending of craving, cessation, extinguishment. This is called the perception of cessation. So basically the same idea, but now the ending of everything. First the fading away, and then even more powerful, the ending of everything. And what is the perception of dissatisfaction with the whole world? It is when the mendicant lives giving up and not grasping on to the attraction and grasping to the world, the mental fixation, the insistence and the underlying tendencies. This is called the perception of dissatisfaction with the whole world. And this is a nice little perception that you can do sometimes. And when you see the world kind of always going in funny ways, doing weird things, sometimes going well, but often going bad, then it leaves this feeling that the whole world is not really all that interesting anymore. When you see all the problems that faces us, when you see the politicians that we have, and it is not, I don't want to be one of those people who says bad things about politicians. They are human beings. They are trapped by the system, and they get conditioned by the system. So politicians, we should have compassion for them as well. But we realize that the system is often rotten, and a rotten system produces bad politicians. And this is the way things often are. We should not kind of blame the individuals, because they are just victims, they are slaves of that system themselves. And so we have a compassion in this way for everyone. We understand the problems that are there, but that means that the whole world is kind of yucky, because everything is kind of slightly corrupted. Everything is dodgy. The defilements of the human mind always tries to undermine anything good that we have done. Whenever we get something right, we're able to create a good society. The human defilements are there to corrupt all the good things that we have made. It is the job of the human defilements to reduce to rubble everything that we have achieved in the world. This is what they do. Why? Because they are greedy, they want more, they infiltrate the political process, they bribe people, the vested interests of the powerful always put themselves into the political process to extract more from the society. Why? Because greed is so powerful. Anger and ill will always ultimately lead to more war. The human defilements are ultimately the reason why our society is never stable. I always thought this was one of the kind of really unpleasant things to think about society. There is no stability. There is no final endpoint. Humanity often talks about utopias. You have the communist utopia, or maybe the capitalist utopia, a kind of system that is, once you put it into place, it will last forever after. But in Buddhism, a utopia is impossible. There cannot be a utopia, because the human defilements will always undermine any system you put in place. And what that means is that there is never any rest. You're always playing catch-up, always trying to fix things that are falling apart. And so our world is always so uncertain, so unreliable, being destroyed by the human defilements themselves. And the more you think about the world in this way, the less interesting it becomes, because you realize there is no fix, there is no solution, there is no final state when finally you can rest. You can never rest in the world. You always have to do more. There's always things to be done. And this is why you are still here. So this is kind of the reality from the Buddhist point of view. And if you are one of those people who wants to fix up all the problems, then you will do that for eternity. That will be the fate of a person who wants to fix up the problems. Why? There is no end to problems. And so on that happy note, so it is happy in a sense, because these kind of things, when you perceive this in the right way, you just reject the world. You understand that it is out of control. You understand actually there is no fix in this world. And then you let go more. And that precise letting go is what we're trying to achieve here. Through that perception, you actually gain deeper meditation as a consequence, and you actually gain more joy and happiness because of that. Then you are doing these perceptions in the right way. Sabba loke anabhiratta sanya is what this is about. The discontent, the rejection of the entire world. That is like the external world. And then you can also take that into the personal world of your family, etc. That world also is tinged, actually not tinged, it is marked by the same problems. The fact that your family is far more unstable than you think it is. People can die at any time. The people who are most dear to you, that's a terrible thing to say, but they can die at any time. We don't expect this. This is one of the things I remember when I was growing up as a child. The family seemed like this stable thing. You relied on your parents. They were there to guide you. Your mum and your dad always present, looking after you, caring for you. It seemed like when I think back, it seemed almost permanent in a very strange kind of way. And then you become older, and then people start to die, and you realize how incredibly wrong you were, how incredibly fragile and vulnerable that whole system is, and how it can collapse so quickly. You understand this with the outer world. You understand it with your personal world. Sabba loke anabhiratta sanya. And finally, you understand it also with your own inner world, with your own 5 khandhas, ultimately. And that is where this kind of comes to a conclusion. The next one is the perception of impermanence of all condition. Sabba sankharesu anicca sanya. It is when a mendicant is horrified, repelled, and disgusted with all phenomena. This is called the perception of impermanence of all phenomena. I prefer all phenomena to conditions, because conditions to me sounds like a cause or something, but it means all phenomena. So you understand the impermanence of all phenomena. It is a little bit of what I have talked about already, very similar to that. And when you see that impermanence, you get repelled, horrified, and disgusted. You reject it completely. And that is the outcome of that. This is one of those very strange perceptions. It only occurs here in the suttas. And you wonder sometimes exactly what it means. There are different readings of this one. One of the readings is seeing non-desire in all phenomena, and which seems very strange, because that's not how the suttas usually speak. So this is probably right. Anyway, then we have the last one, which is the mindfulness of breathing, which we have seen already in a lot of detail. I spent 2 whole days just going through mindfulness of breathing, so I'm going to skip that now. Then we come to the end of the sutta. If you were to recite to the mendicant Girimananda these 10 perceptions, it is possible that after hearing them, his illness will die down on the spot. Then Ananda, having learned these 10 perceptions from the Buddha himself, went to Girimananda and recited them. Then, after Girimananda had heard these 10 perceptions, his illness died down on the spot. And that's how he recovered from that illness. So, there you are. These are a number of things for you to think about, to reflect on, and to help you to enhance your practice on the path. So that is all for tonight. Tomorrow there's going to be a short talk. I will summarize everything a little bit and give you some brief advice on how to take some of these ideas away with you and practice them in, especially for the lay people in your ordinary life. I think the monastics, for them it is more just continuing with the same kind of practice. So that is all for now, and we'll see you back for the Q&A in about an hour or so.